Good evening, everybody. My name is Danny Segura. Welcome to my weekly live Q&A. Interesting week. A lot has happened. I feel like in the news, it seems, obviously we're much closer to UFC 249, and yeah, a lot went down on news as far as MMA. Being off due to the coronavirus. There's still plenty to talk about, and a lot of storylines developing. And yeah, I can see by your questions, you guys are already addressing certain things going on in the space. So if you're new to this is how it works. You ask questions, I answer them. Pretty simple. The way to submit questions, it is via Twitter. I already previewed all your questions and have them queued up. I answer for about half of the video. I make sure that part is designated to the Twitter questions. Once I'm done with those, I move over to the live chat and answer questions on the live chat. So if you didn't get to ask questions on Twitter, don't worry, you can do so in the live chat in the later part of this video. So just hang tight if you want to ask something. For those that don't know me, my name is Danny Segura. I am a reporter for MMAJunkie.com, formerly MMAfighting.com. So yeah, this weekly Q&A is just about it's about anything, but usually it revolves around the combat sports world. But you can ask whatever you want. My drink of choice today, it is actually not Negroni. You see those bubbles here? I actually blended in Colombiana, which is a Colombian soda, which there's no similar American soda, so it's hard to describe it. Say if it would have been Cuatro, like another Colombian soda, I could compare it to Sprite or something like that. This is its own thing. I put some gin in it, a little bit of Campari, so it's like I guess like a Colombian Negroni maybe. I don't know, but it does the job. It doesn't taste too bad. It's not bad. But not sure if I'll do that mixture again, but certainly it's not bad. It's drinkable. By the way, a little bit of news update. I said, on last Q&A, I said that I was going to adopt a dog, and I did. So I also said that by this episode, which is episode number 18, I would have a buddy to introduce to you guys. His name is Hachiko. He's actually right here behind me. So just give me 1 second. Say hello. He looks like a little teddy bear. He's super good. He's a really good dog. So far, no accidents as far as accidents in the house. He's house trained. Doesn't really bark too much. He's about a year and 6 months. That's what they told me at the rescue home. But it's they don't know for sure because it's hard to determine the dog's age. He used to be a street dog in Texas, and made his way over here to Brooklyn. And yeah, I got him. His name is Hachiko. That's the name the shelter gave him, and he's a really good dog. He's awesome, and I'm really happy to have him. Yeah, this whole pandemic has been got me a little bit down, so I figured it'd be a good time to have a dog. Plus, I work from home all the time, so why not? But he's a very very good dog, right, Hachiko? All right, go back to sleep, buddy. But yeah, he's a great dog, so I'm really happy. And I got lucky. He's cute, and he's juicioso, how you would say in Spanish. He's a good dog. But anyways, let's get this thing started. Enough about my dog and my drinking. We got some questions to answer. So, first question is by James. Sentiment Glow. Do you think Tony Ferguson is coming around as a star? So great question, because one of the biggest things that I mentioned in my previous live Q&As was how the UFC kept insisting on hosting this pay-per-view. And, for the most part, everybody got it. Like Khabib Ferguson, that's a huge fight because Khabib is a big star, and, he's got a really interesting, complex, and serious challenger ahead of him who if you can read the stats and the resume, definitely enough to um, get casual fans to doubt a little bit of Habib, since he's such a dominant force, undefeated fighter, of course. So, there was definitely something there. Plus, that fight's been in the making for a very long time. Now, without the Habib component, that's when I question, like, why is the UFC pushing to host this fight so bad? Because Gaethje, I mean, he's a fan favorite, but that's among the hardcores. And basically, you can say the same thing about Tony Ferguson. They're not really necessarily known as stars, right? Not like a Conor McGregor, not like a Khabib, not like a Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, John Jones, that sort of level. But obviously he's still a very popular fighter. It's not like he's an underground fighter, but yeah, by no means I do not think he's a star yet, but I do think he has star potential. Just the guy is is a little out of the ordinary. The guy's definitely interesting. He's an extremely good fighter. Very interesting as far as his skill set, but also as far as his personality and the things that he says in the media. So again, he's somebody that could be very appealing to casual fans, I think, especially with his skill set. He's someone that once you watch him fight, you kind of become a fan forever. Like I don't know a single person that doesn't enjoy Tony Ferguson's style. And look, this pandemic has kind of forced everybody to consume a lot more media, whether it is news media or just entertainment, right? Sports has been down. There's really no sports actually going on right now. And MMA is the only sport that seems to be in the works, right, with this UFC 249 card. So I assume if this gets pushed properly, if this fight does actually go down, a lot of sports fans that may not necessarily be MMA fans, or they may be MMA fans, but just come around those big fights, they go, F it. There's nothing else going on. Let me get that pay-per-view and watch that. So I think there could very well be a good amount of eyes on that card. We'll see. But there's also an argument to be made about like the economy. People are losing jobs, getting furloughed from their jobs. So is there money for them to pay a pay per view? So that's definitely an argument as well. But so yeah, I do think this is a great opportunity for him to become a star, and I think he has the makings of becoming a star. Maybe not like a Conor McGregor or a Khabib per se, who's got like a whole culture and a whole demographic of people behind him, but he could definitely be someone that will be could offer like decent numbers for the company as far as pay-per-view buys in the future. Obviously, keeping in mind he wins and he beats Justin Gaethje, which is no guarantee. Obviously, Gaethje is a very skilled fighter, and he's game in this bout. But I do have a feeling, and this goes for Gaethje as well. I think a little bit more for Ferguson because his style's a little. I mean, both of them are very exciting. But I think Ferguson's style is a little bit more unique. Obviously, he's got a better resume, 12-fight win streak. You can't beat that. And the guy's just a weird dude, and I mean that like and I say that like in the best way possible. I'm not trying to throw any shade his way, but yeah, he's just a weird dude, and people are attracted to the odd, the unconventional. So he could very well become a bigger star from UFC 249 if he were victorious, obviously. But we'll see. Again, a lot of things have to happen. The fight, first of all, has to happen. I do think there's a very good chance that it goes down, but you never know in this climate. This climate is quite odd. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how the pay-per-view buys go and all that. But I do think this is an opportunity for him to become something. I mean, he is definitely already something within the space, but extend his brand, extend his name as a fighter, and become a bigger star for the company. So yeah, I do believe he's on the verge of something. Again, like I said on the previous live Q&A, this fight will either make the Khabib for his fight with Khabib even greater, or it will just vanish it. It will destroy it because once he loses, I mean, it's a long and hard road to get back to the title. Maybe not super long for him because he is on a 12-fight win streak. But again, with the Conor McGregor factor, a bunch of other contenders waiting in line, it's definitely not an easy path to get back to the title. So again, I do believe this fight would just make that fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov either much bigger or will just destroy it. And it's crazy because we've been waiting 5 years for this fight or something like that, or I believe since they started trying to book it since like 2013 maybe or something like that. It's been a minute, or maybe a little later than that. Let me just double check on that. But yeah, it's been in the making for quite some time. Let's see. Tony Ferguson. So he was supposed to fight Habib in December 2015. So about 5 years, like four and a half. So yeah, it's been a minute since they've been trying to make that fight, but definitely Tony Ferguson could very well extend his brand and extend his profile as a fighter with this fight with Justin Gaethje. I mean, you beat Gaethje, I think everybody respects you after that, and he already has respect. But again, maybe not the casuals might not be as exposed to him. But after this pay per view, I think that can change. Not in a dramatic fashion. I don't think he'll become a huge star again like Conor McGregor, but he could definitely do something here with this opportunity. Great question. All right, the seaside question number 2. What's the one bout you're looking forward to the most? So obviously, Gaethje versus Ferguson. I think we can all agree that's the fight we all want to see, and yeah, it's a fantastic bout. So that's the fight I'm looking forward to the most. But apart from the main event, I'm not gonna even mention the co-main event, which is Henry Cejudo versus Dominick Cruz. I think the fight itself is good, and I'm looking forward to it. There's another fight I'm looking forward to even more, which is Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rosenstruck. I think that's a fantastic fight. I think we'll see the next challenger for the heavyweight title come out of that contest. Obviously, I think the UFC's waiting for that trilogy fight between Stipe Miocic, the current champion, and Daniel Cormier, former champion. They got to wrap that up. I mean, Cormier has been there for the company, time after time. I don't think they're gonna do him wrong and sort of skip him over and have one of these two guys, whether it's Ngannou or Rosenstruck, fight for the belt next. But again, I don't think. I mean, keeping in mind the win streaks that both guys are in, I don't think the UFC will give either guy another fight if whoever's the victorious fighter at UFC 249. I really don't see them doing that. I think at that point, they're just gonna kind of leave them on ice and hope that Stipe Miocic versus Cormier fight goes down fairly soon, so they can just have the next contender, right there waiting in line, and be able to book a heavyweight fight in no time, in fairly quick succession. So that's the fight I'm looking forward to the most outside of the main event. I think it has a lot of implications. Obviously, like I said, I think the winner will go on to fight for the title here, and also just the matchup itself. Francis Ngannou, he's just an absolute beast. By the way, he demolishes people, and he's a very dangerous striker. But everything you say about Francis Ngannou, you can say the same for Jairzinho Rosenstruck. I think he might be a little less, or he might come off a little less scary because he's not as big. He's not obviously he's a heavyweight, he's a big dude, but he's not as physically imposing as Ngannou. But I would say this: I think his striking, given his lengthy kickboxing background, is far more polished, and he's a far more accurate striker, and still very powerful. Still packs a lot of power. I mean, he's KO'd. He's finished everybody in the UFC basically that he's fought in. I mean, has he ever gone to a decision? I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. He's been in the UFC since early 2019, and he's picked up 4 knockout TKO wins. So he's stopped everyone that they've put in front of him. So he's got a big challenge with Ngannou, but again, Jairzinho Rosenstruck doesn't have wrestling credentials like Cain Velasquez or Curtis Blades or all these other opponents that have faced Ngannou in the past. So I expect this to be a striking battle. It comes down to Ngannou, who's again a skilled striker, but certainly relies a lot more on his power versus Jairzinho Rosenstruck, who has power but relies a little bit more on technique. So it's a very intriguing matchup. I'm curious to see how it looks, and yeah, I mean, I think most people would have Francis Ngannou as the favorite. I haven't checked the odds, but I think that would probably be accurate. But man, I've been following Jairzinho Rosenstruck's career since he started in the UFC, and I see definitely someone that could very well be champion in the future. So I'm not sleeping on him, and I think this fight's going to be closer than most people think, or it could be a first round knockout for Francis Ngannou real quick. But you can't discard anything, or it could go the other way. But I certainly think Jairzinho Rosenstruck could very well defeat Ngannou, and if he goes on to fight for the title, I feel like he has enough tools to capture that belt. Um, so yeah, I think it's an interesting fight, and I'm looking forward to that fight a lot. Outside of the main event, but there are other great fights as well. I mean, the Henry Cejudo Dominick Cruz, I don't really agree with the actual matchmaking, but as a fight itself, I think it's phenomenal. Also, Cruz hasn't fought in a very long time, and I'm curious to see how he looks. I mean, he's been this guy that whenever he comes back from long layoffs, he's looked amazing. But again, everybody has a line. You know, the older you get, the tougher it is to be able to come back and put on world class performances. So I'm kind of wondering how far can Cruz sort of take this reputation. And Henry Cejudo, we've seen what he did at 135 in his last bout against Marlon Moraes. So very impressed with him. Definitely a very tough test for Dominick Cruz. But Dom is the greatest bantamweight that's ever existed. So yeah, that's an interesting fight as well, just from an action standpoint. You got Jeremy Steven versus Calvin Cater. That's an amazing fight. Greg Hardy's on that fight. You know, he's still a heavyweight. Puts on heavyweights. It could go either way. It could be boring, or it could be actually a banger. So we'll see. Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, great fight. Olenek versus Werdum, fantastic fight. I expect good heavyweight ground game, which is actually very rare to see. But I expect the fight to hit the ground and actually see some sort of interesting and intricate ground battle, which you barely get with heavyweights. This could very well be one of the very few, if not the only matchup within the UFC that could actually offer that a heavyweight, like great jiu-jitsu. And then below that, you got Carlos Esparza versus Michelle Watterson. I like both fighters. Both are exciting fighters. You know, that's a fine fight. Uriah Hall versus Jacare Souza. That's a great fight. Vicente Luque versus Nico Price. Oh my God, that is a fantastic fight. After Ngannou Rosenstruck, I think I'm looking forward to Cejudo Cruz there, and then following close behind it would be Vicente Luque versus Nico Price. It's not really a fight that will put either guy in title contention. Certainly would put him in a better position. Obviously, a win is a win in the UFC. But just from an action standpoint, both guys just don't know how to put on a boring fight. So I'm looking forward to that one very, very much. And there's a few other fights that are exciting as well. So all fun stuff, man. This is overall a great card. But to answer your question, the Seaside, outside of the main event, Ngannou versus Rosenstruck is the fight I'm looking forward to the most. All right, question number 3 by A Pass of Wokeness. If Tony somehow gets through Justin, then somehow beats Khabib, you gotta learn how to spell that. You probably do, but you're trolling here. Where would you put him at 155? At a 155 greatest list? That would be a hypothetical 14-5 win streak with those 2 wins, with 2 interim titles and an undisputed title. Yes, so great question. I think at that point, if you mention under those circumstances, if Tony Ferguson were to beat Justin Gaethje, and then he went on to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think that makes him, again, a 14-fight win streak. You could very well make the argument that a lot of his fights, probably his last 3 or 4 fights, could very well be title defenses. I mean, he's been fighting world-class fighters for a while. It's just been a misfortune that he hasn't been able to fight for the real belt. But yeah, I think at that point, he becomes the greatest lightweight that ever existed. Which is funny because he would just become champion, and you know what they say, you're not a champion until you defend your belt, although that's BS, but there is something to be said about the value of defending a belt. I think it's far more complicated to defend a title than to get it. It's a lot easier to get to the top than to stay at the top, because on the way there you slowly fight better fighters. You don't fight the very best until you get into the title fight. But once you're in that title fight, from then on, you're fighting the best, no matter what. You're fighting the best contender at the time, usually, for the most part. Every now and then you'll get the number 13 Dan Henderson challenging for the title against Michael Bisping, right? You'll get those. But for the most part, you fight the man at the time. So yeah, it would be one of those weird situations where he wouldn't have defended his belt. But I think, in my opinion, at that point, you have to call him the greatest lightweight of all time, as far as maybe not the greatest, but the most skilled, the best lightweight of all time. Because I think greatness, and there's a question about this later. I think greatness is also defined by achievement, and that means winning titles and defending them. So maybe not the greatest. I think I would have to look back and actually. I still think probably BJ Penn, as far as like records and what he was able to do, he might be the greatest. He achieved the most, right? Even a title at welterweight. Um, but there's certainly no doubt in my mind that he would be the best. Like you could pair him up with at that point. I mean, he would answer all the questions because at this point I have no doubt in my mind that just that Tony Ferguson can beat everybody that's put in front of him except Justin Gaethje. Right? I'm not sure about that. I'm not saying he can or he can. We'll find out. And again, another fighter that you can add to that list would be Khabib. I'm not saying that he can't. I'm just saying I don't know if he can or can't. But if he does answer those questions and he beats both of them, he would by far be the best lightweight of all time. Would he be the greatest? Definitely, there's an argument for that. But I think greatness comes with achievements and in defending titles and jumping weight classes and having success at other weight classes as well, and sort of answering all those type of questions. So maybe the greatest. There's an argument for that, but certainly the best lightweight of all time if he were to beat Gaethje and then beat Khabib. I mean, that just think about that road to get to the title. I mean, it's already been a very, very long road, and all of a sudden, they put the Gaethje hurdle in front of him. And I mean, not that it was placed on against his will. I mean, he's willing to take that fight because I'm sure he could easily just be like, no, I'm good. I'll wait for Khabib, and I'm pretty sure the UFC would honor that and give him a fight against Khabib whenever Khabib is available. But the man wants to fight, so you got to respect that, right? All right. I believe we are in question number. Oh, we're in question number 4. Now, this question was actually screenshotted from a different computer, so it's actually a black because I have my Apple settings on like night mode or whatever for this computer. So, in case you're wondering why it looks weird, Michael Terrell asks, Fight Island belt. I didn't think about it till you literally threw this question like 20 minutes ago, right before I went live. And you know what? That idea kind of had a little bit of a ring to it. The UFC filed some trademarks for Fight Island. Fight Island is starting to become its own thing, as we've seen. Fighters seem very hyped about it. To me, I'm guessing it would be kind of a little bit refreshing and cool to see, an octagon in a beach and sort of a different setting than what we're normally used to seeing as far as UFC events. But at the end of the day, I'm tuning in because I like to watch fights, and that's what I'm gonna get, right? Like if you were to put on like B or C quality fights on an island, or you were to put on A quality fights in a venue, I'm gonna watch the stuff that's going down at the venue all day. Like I don't care about the island itself. Like it's nice aesthetically, like sure, but I don't know. It doesn't do much for me. But I do gotta admit it's sort of becoming its own thing, and so yeah, I don't know. I think in these times the UFC, for the most part, they have a recipe and they just stick with it, and it's a very successful recipe. That's why they're a very successful company. But sometimes when you have certain formulas and you stick with them, that can kill creativity, and that's something we've seen. The UFC operate in. Like there's not much. There's not much variation within their product. It's usually high level fights, and that's about it. But for the first time, they're faced with a situation where their product is going to look different because of this whole Fight Island thing. So, I'm thinking, F it, like, why not, why not have fun with it? Why not do a Fight Island belt? I don't, and one of the reasons why I think that could work, because I don't suspect, I mean, Valentina Shevchenko did say that she wanted in on the Fight Island, but for the most part, you don't see Khabib, you don't see the biggest stars going, yo, I want in on Fight Island, I want to live on Fight Island, and all this. For the most part, is if sort of the contenders that are coming up that want in on that sort of situation. So why not have a belt? Maybe have a little tournament on the island, and if you lose, you get booted off the island, literally like Survivor. It would be, bringing a bunch of fighters. I mean, you got Greg Hardy recently saying to TMC that he wants to live on the island. And if I'm not mistaken, they're building infrastructure so you can stay there. I mean, the fighters will have to sleep there. It's not like they'll fly in for weigh-ins and then fly back home and then fly in for their fights. So there's going to be infrastructure for them to train and for them to sleep there. So yeah, why not bring? And this again, I'm just making this up as I go. Why not bring like 10 fighters per weight class, Fight Island belt, and have a little tournament? Why not? And if you lose, you're out of Fight Island, and you can make a whole reality TV show, kind of like The Ultimate Fighter Live or something like that. I don't know if they would have too much time to sort of not have it live and then do the editing on the fly. Maybe they do. I'm not quite sure, but usually with The Ultimate Fighter, they film and it go months go on before an actual episode airs. So, but I think there's an opportunity for the UFC to be creative and make something unique here and have fun. And they filed trademarks for Fight Island, so it looks like they're taking the thing seriously. And yeah, why not have fun, right? Like the sports are supposed to be fun, so why not? All right. I think Francis Ngannou popped on on the chat. That's probably not the real Francis Ngannou, but if it is, Ngannou, I am very much looking forward to your fight. Is that him? I'm just gonna make sure. Cause hey, I did have Chris Cyborg actually pop in one time on one of my chats actually when I was in Vegas, and she was very nice. She left me a nice little comment. I actually can't look at the profile. If somebody can confirm, that'd be kind of tight. But I have a good feeling it's probably not the real Ngannou. But yeah, I think why not have the Fight Island belt to answer your question? Have fun with it. Fighters seem to be digging it. All right, Jose Navarrete. Hey Danny, hope all is well. It is, considering yeah, everything's well. Can't complain. With ESPN airing The Last Dance, it got me thinking of how subjective the GOAT convo is. Khabib, for example, could arguably be the greatest lightweight at the moment, but I don't consider him the GOAT. What is your criteria? So yeah, this was the question that I said a couple questions ago that would sort of address um, this whole goat conversation. So the whole goat thing is very subjective. I think everybody has their own definitions, but I do think there are some definitions that are probably more right than others. Right? You can't just be like, well, it's whoever the best striker is, and that's my opinion. So it's true. No, there's certainly something to be said on how to measure greatness. Right? I think there's a bunch of factors that measure greatness. I think skill measures greatness, right? Being a very good fighter, but I think being the best fighter is different from being the greatest, right? Because as generations keep going and going and going, fighting just by default is just going to get better. Techniques are going to get more polished. People are going to figure out what works, what doesn't. New techniques are going to come about. Technology is going to get better as far as training the athletes, recovery. So over time, you're just going to get a better athlete and a better fighter in general. That's usually how everything in life goes. I mean, TVs get better over time. There's really nothing that gets worse over time. Maybe certain things might get worse as far as quality, but like I think that would come down to manufacturers like looking for cheaper ways to make them, right? But as far as the technology to make something the best, everything's just going to get better, and that includes sports as well. um so so I think it'd be kind of silly to be like, oh, the greatest fighter is just always going to be the next guy in line, right? If you're going to measure it by skill itself. So I think greatness goes beyond just skill. It has to deal with achievement as well, right? Because what if you can display all these skills and you can, you know, clearly showcase that you're better than a fighter that from 10, 15 years ago, but that fighter went on to win a title, went on to defend the belt multiple times, went on to win another belt in another weight class, right? Beat all the best guys or ladies of their generation, right? And then that one fighter that clearly seems a lot more skilled than the fighter of old, might just defend the belt once or twice and then lose it, right? So it definitely doesn't just come down to skill. So I think achievement has a lot to do with it. I think obviously having an undefeated record, you can't say somebody that has like 20, 15 losses, even if that person goes on to achieve great things, it's kind of hard to claim they're the greatest, right? So, um, so I think that it's a mixture of being coming as close as possible to undefeated, if not become undefeated. Um, win a belt, defend the belt. You can add on to greatness by winning a belt at another weight class, having success at another weight class, beating all the top contenders of your time, and yeah, I think that's basically my criteria. So with Habib, like obviously he's a great fighter, but he's yet to be the greatest because if you compare him to who I think is the greatest, George St. Pierre, he went on to defend his belt for many, many times. Always took on the top contender. You can't say that guy dodged anybody. Um, Only suffered two losses, and both losses he avenged them. That was to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra. He beat those guys again in the rematches, and he went on to win a belt at a heavier weight class. So if you pile all that up, I mean, he literally checks all the boxes. I mean, there's also an argument there for John Jones. He's defended the belt many, many times. He's beaten the guys from the previous generation of his generation, and he's starting to beat the guys of the future generation. And obviously, a very skilled fighter as well. You have to factor that in. But something I would like to add is that he hasn't won another belt um, in a different weight class. George St. Pierre did. So yeah, again, those are all factors. But that's basically how I measure greatness. Greatness has to do a lot with achievement. And so yeah, it's a combination of things, but I feel like achievement in my mind leads the pack, and I think that's how like the whole goat conversation should be based on. That's sort of the way I see it. Well, great question though, because it often comes up, and and I feel like obviously I'm always not always, but for the most part, like I'm obviously gonna agree with my opinions, right? I'm always gonna not think I'm right. Obviously, there's room for me to be wrong, but if I think something should be a certain way, is because I there's reasons that I believe that, right? I believe that to be true, and I feel like my definition is pretty on point. Like you gotta keep a lot of things in mind. It's a mixture of everything, but achievement has to lead the pack. If you look at, like, for example, soccer, the people who we consider the greatest, right? Ronaldo, Maradona, Pele, all those guys were world champions. All those guys, achieved great, like achieved a lot in their lives. Not only they were very skilled, but they actually got a lot of things done. One of the things that haunts Messi till this day. I mean, the guy's very skilled. You see his skill on the pitch time after time. And he's won La Liga, he's won Copa del Rey. He's got plenty of achievements, but one thing that's always haunted him, he's been unable to win a World Cup with Argentina. He just has, and that has to hurt his legacy as far as greatness is concerned. That has to, that has to. So yeah, greatness, I think, has to be paired with achievement. To answer your question. All right, this one's a simple one by anonymous dude 123. Bro, are you on TikTok? First of all, it's TikTok. I know when most people hear TikTok, they think of teenage girls dancing. I do, but Gary V, I don't know who that is, says it really is in place to grow a brand right now. Would you ever do 1 minute commercials for live shows, articles, or quick thoughts? Thank you. The short answer to that is no. Yeah, whenever I think of TikTok, is to be honest, TikTok kind of annoys me. I don't know. It's just not my thing. Yeah, it's just something I'm not into. But I'm never say never. It is a growing platform. It is something that I acknowledge that has become very popular, especially during these pandemic times where people are looking to stay entertained. And to be honest, there's been a couple of TikToks that have been kind of funny, but for the most part, I think they're pretty lame. To be honest, um, Yeah, and from what I'm doing, which is reporting journalism and sort of yeah, sort of a lot of opinion videos and stuff like that. I don't feel like TikTok is a right platform for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I think yeah, you're not gonna see me on TikTok anytime soon, unless something drastic happens. But I don't see myself having a TikTok anytime soon. Honestly, I think it's very Gen Z, to be honest. Like again, teenage girls. That's what I associate TikTok with. Not my vibe, bro. Um, question by Nick Hill: do you think there's any chance Conor fights in 2020? In 2020, many of his fights are just as much of a spectacle as they are sport. So I can't see the UFC putting together a card around him that's going to take place in an empty arena. So yeah, that's something I've thought of a lot, and I believe in the last Q&A, um, sort of a similar question was asked. It was something more like, "Do you see Conor McGregor fighting in an empty arena?" But to be honest, I don't know if he fights in 2020. I think he's gonna fight once the UFC has this whole event pandemic situation figured out. They're definitely on their way to figuring it out. We're gonna see an event fairly soon. We're gonna see how they handle that. We're gonna see the people's reactions, the media's reaction to having an event. Hopefully, knock on wood, they don't have any issues with COVID-19, and hopefully there's no COVID-19 spread around the event and no fighters get infected and whatnot. But so yeah, so I don't think Conor will return under those conditions. I feel like he's gonna wait and see how the UFC deals with this whole situation, and then once that gets dealt with, and they have sort of a recipe in place, and we see events regularly rolling out, I think that's when he'll dive back in. As far as fighting in an empty arena, I have a feeling this is gonna take a long time. There's a very good podcast called The Daily by the New York Times, and I believe a few days ago they had a reporter who's an expert covering diseases, pandemics, etc. And he's been, he's already covered a few of these viral diseases and and viruses, and he's talked to many experts and he's very knowledgeable, and he says something that I actually vocalized within my live Q&As, and how I imagined returning to normal life would be, which is he basically described returning to normal life like a dance. We're going to be doing a lot of this, a lot of opening and closing, opening and closing, opening and closing. We're going to be monitoring the spike of cases and deaths, right? And as soon as it shoots up, we're going to close back down. And once things ease up again, things are going to open again. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error. That's why now, with having been a little bit more removed from the April 18th date, I'm far more comfortable with the UFC hosting an event than I was back then. Because we're gonna have to try it out, and part of that trying it out is seeing how things work out. Putting on things, opening things, and see what repercussions that has on the cases and on the deaths, right? And it's gonna be a compromise. I mean, to get normality back, some lives will have to be put at risk. That's just the way it works. It's kind of like, it kind of sucks and it kind of sounds messed up, but the alternative to protecting everybody would just be to remain in constant lockdown, and that's definitely not a solution. So we're gonna have to find a solution to this, and over time we'll find the things that work and the things that don't, and that's only done through careful trial and error. Obviously, we're not just gonna open up beaches and already open up concerts and open up arenas for fans to gather for sporting events. No, no, no. Things are gonna move slowly, and we're gonna sort of figure things out. But yeah, I feel like fans in arenas are gonna be a thing of the past. It's gonna be a long time till we get, like, the type of crowds that Conor McGregor is used to having for his fights. And with that being said, I don't know if Conor McGregor wants to sit out a year or 2 years. I mean, he was talking about 2020 being his comeback season of fighting potentially 3 times. So I do feel like he's going to be on ice a little bit, because He doesn't want to fight in unknown circumstances. He's gonna wait till the UFC machine sort of figures everything out and they get in a groove. And once that gets figured out, I feel like he'll jump back into the pool. Um, and that's gonna mean without fans, in my opinion. But I really don't see fans in arenas by the end of this year. But I could definitely see Conor McGregor fighting by the end of this year. So to answer your question, I do think he'll fight in 2020. Probably the later part. I think fall or the third or fourth quarter, either or. But I do see him fighting. I don't think this is going to be the comeback season that he described and that he said it was going to be. Obviously, if the coronavirus has delayed everybody's plans on everything. But I do see him fighting on 2020. So we'll see. And there are interesting options. Um, you know, there are interesting options for him, especially the Nate Diaz one. I feel like that's always a big fight, and what a better time to sort of pull that Nate Diaz card. Get into a winnable fight. It's winnable because he already won one of those, and sort of make his claim to be able to fight for the title. Although I don't think he doesn't need to make much of a claim. Dana White is already into the idea of him fighting for the belt, but yeah, I do feel like he'll fight in 2020. All right, this is the last question of Twitter, and then I will hop over to the live chat. So just keep that in mind in case you want to ask questions. I would start getting those ready to throw in the live chat. All right, Terrence Leverett. What are your thoughts on Mark Hunt wanting to fight in Japan? Japan has been known for a lack of testing for PEDs, for lack of testing of PEDs, which begs the question: does Mark Hunt hate steroid users, or just losing to one? Also, thoughts on Rockhold returning. I think Chris and Luke is the match to make. I think Chris and Luke is the match to make. Yeah. So yeah, for those that don't know, Mark Hunt recently did a sort of like Instagram live interview. I didn't watch the whole thing because it was like well over an hour. It was like an hour and 30 minutes. But my colleague Nolan King over at MMAJunkie.com did write an article about that. But that was mostly centered towards him sort of trying to sue the UFC again or something like that, because he did sort of come up short in that lawsuit that he had for the UFC. But yeah, I didn't hear the Japan thing, but he did mention that he wanted to do some boxing fights, and he did mention that he was a free agent, so I'm not surprised that he would want to return to Japan. Also, he made his name off, Pride, which obviously hosted most of its fights in Japan, the majority. So I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense what he says in the sense of, he's suing the UFC because of the whole Brock Lesnar situation that he popped and all that. Like, it kind of makes sense and it doesn't, and I'll explain why. It doesn't make sense that he's like against that, and yet he wants to fight for promotions that don't have USADA and perhaps places that have been known, like Terrence, like you alluded, for having PED usage, right? Literally, Pride contracts had printed, we will not test for PEDs. Like, it was the wild west back then. Like, anybody could do anything and they were good. But there is, though, I would say, whatever you get into a situation, or whenever you get a job, or whatever it is, in his case, his job is fighting. They gotta, or really any situation in life, like you gotta go into it knowing what everything entails, right? And fighting for Pride, you kind of knew what's up, so you were kind of mentalized for that. Now, there's a difference, even if you want to use PDs or not, like, you knew what's up. Now, for the UFC, there were already certain requirements, which were you had to be in the USADA pool for at least 6 months before being eligible to fight. You had to be tested, all this, all that. So those were the circumstances and the stipulations that he would enter fights, enter UFC fights. Knowing that there was all these prerequisites and requirements that you had to meet before going. And that was not met with the UFC. So that's why I'm saying it kind of makes sense. because, you know, in his mind, Brock Lesnar should have been in the USADA pool for 6 months, but that got waived by the UFC. They're like, nah, you're good. You don't need to be in it for 6 months in order to fight. And guess what? He did test positive after. So, again, in PDs, you know, they're performance enhancing. There's definitely a conversation to be had about how much they can actually enhance your fighting. I tend to believe that they do have they're not the determining factor, but they're definitely a big help. Um, would Brock Lesnar would have defeated Mark Hunt, you know, without PEDs? I don't know, and we'll never have an answer to that question. But the fact is that he did kind of get, I don't want to say screwed over, but like certainly the situation favored Brock Lesnar more than it did to him. Like, it, you know, if they wanted to fight an even playing field and on the stipulations that he had been fighting on, you know, Brock Lesnar should have been in the pool for 6 months before stepping in the octagon to face Mark Hunt. So I kind of get where he's coming from. But if he really does have a huge issue with PEDs, there's definitely a conversation to be had about why he would want to fight, um, you know, elsewhere. But at the same time, that's how he makes a living, and you know, his relationship with the UFC currently is not the greatest. So he's gonna have to fight somewhere, and the only promotion that has USADA is the UFC. So anywhere that he fights, it's always gonna be seen um, as a lesser, you know, situation, or a lesser promotion that cares less about, you know, PEDs, right? Just because USADA is not there, although that may be, you know, incorrect, but that's certainly the case. But at the end of the day, the man makes money. One of the ways that he makes money is fighting, um, and you know, he's got to fight. So again, it doesn't surprise me that he would want to return to Japan, where, you know, that's where he built most of his career. But yeah, it's a weird situation. As far as the second part of your question, Terrence, about Luke Rockhold saying, so for those that don't know, Luke Rockhold recently said that sort of he's starting to get the itch back. He's not committing on a return, but he's definitely not discarding a return, in saying that it could be possible for him to return to MMA. With those type of comments, a lot of questions have arise like yours, as far as who should he face in his return. He's in a tricky situation, obviously, because he's a very big name, former champion. But at the same time, his previous fights, he didn't look great. You know, most of the images that people have in their minds of his last couple fights were him getting knocked out. Um, and so yeah, he's a bit of an interesting spot. And whenever you're in that spot, uh, the as far as combat sports goes, usually you want to take a tune-up fight. Now we know tune-up fights don't come often in the UFC, and usually they just get always, you know, you're always fighting the best at all times. Every now and then you'll be able to get a tune-up fight, but for his convenience and for, you know, for his sake, I'd like to see him in a tune-up fight. I think, you know, Chris Weidman fight makes sense. Chris Weidman is someone that has been active, you know, or fairly active, you know, definitely more active than Luke Rockhold. And is someone that has also been knocked out recently and hasn't had the greatest performances. Also, they have a little bit of a rivalry. They had a fun fight in their first time out. You know, it was a pretty good fight. Did it win Fight of the Night awards? Maybe, but I just remember it being really entertaining. And so yeah, at this point in their career, they're both big names. They're both coming off losses, so it definitely makes sense for them to fight. I wouldn't rule out a fight with Anderson Silva. He's somebody that's also in that same sphere. Definitely not in his prime. Someone that's coming off losses, but still a very big name. So I like the Chris Weidman idea. I think that's a good fight. I like the Anderson Silva idea as well. Let me pull up the middleweight rankings. I would assume he would want to return to middleweight. I don't know if he actually commented on that, but um, I think there could be interesting fights for him both at 205 and 185. So let's see. So at middleweight, again, Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman would be good fights. Can you believe Anderson Silva is still ranked at middleweight? He's ranked 15th. I don't know how, but he is. Um, I think even like a Shoeface who's ranked 14 could be an interesting fight for Luke Rockhold. Both guys have very very good jiu-jitsu, so you know, on that end it would be fairly exciting. Um, A fight with Jacare, although Jacare, I think he's he's had his downs as well, but I think he's definitely in a much better spot than Luke Rockhold. I think that fight could be interesting. At 205, I think a fight with Shogun, another veteran, that could be very interesting as well. Um, this might sound a little crazy, but I think a fight with Johnny Walker wouldn't be the craziest thing. Johnny Walker is definitely someone that has shown promise, but recently, sort of new questions have arisen as far as his ceiling. Obviously, there are clear holes on the ground from his game, and also he's been knocked out before. So, you know, on the feet, I think it's probably not a good matchup for Rockhold, given the fact that Walker has power and Rockhold has it seems he's had a little bit of a suspect chin as of late. Maybe not suspect, but like, I mean, he's taking pretty bad knockouts. But definitely, there's definitely an edge to give him as far as the ground game works. I think Nikita Krivlov, right? He fought Walker. He was the last person to fight Walker, and he exploited a bunch of things on the ground. Like he just took advantage of Walker's a lot of holes that he had in his game on the ground. And Luke Rockhold is a very good grappler, so definitely it wouldn't be a terrible matchup. I think on that end, he could have some success against someone like Johnny Walker, and Johnny Walker could benefit from getting a win over a name like Luke Rockhold, so that can kind of make sense. But I tend to lean towards the veterans. I tend to lean towards the Shogun, the Anderson Silva, the Chris Weidman matchups. That's kind of how I lean. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how they match him up if he does decide to return. All right. Let's see. Now around this time, I take things over to the live chat. So again, if you got questions, now is your time to um, throw those out there. By the way, I'm curious to know how is the 7 p.m. Time for these live Q and A's been holding up for everybody, because yeah, before I was doing them kind of during the day and kind of just doing them on my days off, which are varied depending on the week. Now I just have a set time, which I think it's better, but better for me definitely, because and definitely for, I think, for a lot of people, because they know they can expect this to go down at a specific time every week, specific time and day. But also I feel like 7 p.m. It is definitely late, especially for the European crowd. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this time slot. I think I'm gonna stick with it for now, but definitely not. N- I'm not close to the idea of maybe moving it around in the future for a time that suits, um, the majority of you guys. So yeah. All right. So let's take questions over to the live chat. First question is by Details. Do you think Michael Chandler signs with the UFC after his Bellator deal is done? If so, what would be a good debut matchup? So, for those that don't know, Michael Chandler is on the verge of becoming a free agent. He has one fight left on his deal, and he was booked to fight Benson Henderson in a rematch at Bellator 244. That was supposed to go down on June 6th, but that fight card got canceled or postponed by Bellator due to COVID-19 concerns. So very understandable. Oh shit! By the way, I completely forgot. I can feature questions from YouTube. Boom. There we go. So yes. So that's kind of in the situation that he's in. He's been in this situation before, and he decided to re-sign with Bellator. That is a fantastic question. I was actually trying to set up an interview with him, and we were chatting over text, but I didn't know, and Georgian Goes had actually done an interview, the guys over at MMA Junkie Radio, with him, which I wrote up on MMAJunkie.com. You can check that out. You should check out the interview. It's a lengthy interview. It's like 40 minutes long, but he talks about sort of his feelings and thoughts about free agency. I do believe this situation is a little bit differently than than the first time he tested free agency. For starters, he's older, although he still looks phenomenal. He looks in amazing shape, and his performances have looked, they've been great within the Bellator cage. So it's not like he's had a decline as far as that goes. I think skill set and athleticism, he's still very much there. So there's definitely not there's nothing to be said about that. But the fact that he's 34, I think it would signal that he doesn't have. I mean, he could have a lengthy career. He could very well fight 2, 3, 4 more years. But usually, right, if you were younger, you would expect somebody to stick around longer than somebody that's older. That's just, uh, you know, plain and simple. I think that's common sense. So I think that's different. Um, Also, the fact I don't know if the first time he tested free agency, I don't know if he was a champion or not. But he doesn't. I don't know. I would have to look that up. But he doesn't have the belt now, so I think that kind of hurts him a little bit. Obviously, if you have a belt, you have more leverage. But he's still a guy that has had 22 Bellator fights. He's a guy that's been in the company since 2010. So what, 10 years now? He's somebody that's associated with the Bellator brand. He's somebody that I think Bellator would want to keep because he's one of their bigger names, but at the same time, he's not an ex UFC guy. So it's not like, oh, you just get the guys that that are left over from the UFC, sort of those type of comments, which I don't think that's true. A lot of guys willingly choose to go to Bellator, but so certainly I think there's a lot of value in keeping him around. I think he's very happy with fighting for Bellator. That's something he said in his conversation with the guys over at MMA Junkie Radio. Like, he has nothing against Bellator. He likes fighting for Bellator, and he actually said he hopes to retire at Bellator. However, he is trying to look out after his family, and he's a prize fighter, so he's gonna go wherever he thinks he's got the best deal. My hunch is that he does stay with Bellator. I don't think he'll go over the UFC. I think he's just far too valuable for Bellator, and yeah, I don't think Bellator will let him go. I think they will ultimately offer him, meet in the middle, or whatever they need to do to sort of keep him around. Um, I think if he does go to the UFC, it'd be because of his decision rather than Bellator's, because I do think he can offer a lot of value to that promotion. But for this question, let's say he does go to the UFC. I don't know what would be a good fight for his debut. I think you wanna, with someone of his name, you kind of don't want to throw him right up there and give him a top 5 contender. You don't want to give him a no name either. You want to give him someone that has a name, but at the same time, somebody that's somewhat in the lower rankings to sort of elevate him, see what he's got, see how he performs in the UFC. I mean, we talk about how many fighters that cross over from other promotions. Daniel Cormier is a good example. They often talk about, like, look, we can have all this experience in other promotions, but the octagon jitters are legit. I mean, it's the UFC, right? They're considered the best, the premier mixed martial arts promotion. So there's definitely something to be said about that. So I think let's look at the UFC lightweight rankings right now. So I think somebody that has a good name, but at the same time is not at the very, very top, would be an appropriate matchup for him within the UFC. Let's see. Look, I think somebody like Anthony Pettis could be a good fight for him. I don't know if they're friends or not. I don't think so, because they don't have, they don't share the same. But that could be a good fight for him. Again, Pettis, former world champion, someone that's still very skilled. Definitely a top 10 fighter, I consider him. Um, but still somebody that's not at the very top, not top 5. So I think that would be a good matchup for him. I think somebody like let's see. Hmm. Paul Felder would be a good matchup for him. Mm, Donald Cerrone would be a good fight for him. Edson Barbosa, if he sticks around at 155, because I believe he's mentioned how he wants to go down to 145, could be a good matchup for him. Sort of that's kind of the type of opponent I'm thinking. But the UFC could very well have different plans if they do actually sign him. So we'll see. We'll see. But I do have a feeling he sticks around Bellator. That's what I think. Let's see. Refreshing drink. Your dog is adorable. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited, man. I mean, not gonna lie, this pandemic has been a little rough on me. Being here in New York, it's not like I have a lot of space. I have a fairly small apartment, but it's not like everybody here has a small apartment unless you're like stupid and like stupid loaded with money. For the most part, here in New York, that's something that that you put on the line, right? Like it's a very cool city. There's a lot of cool things about it, but something you're gonna have to be okay with is living in a small space, and that's generally okay because for the most part, the things that this city offers are so cool, and the social life is so cool that like you're kind of barely at your apartment, like you're just out and about for the most part. Um, it's a little bit different for me because I work from home, so I do spend a good amount of time at home, anyways. Even before the whole pandemic thing, but I was used to going about my boxing gym on a several times during the week, playing soccer on a weekly basis, seeing my friends, going hanging out with my friends, right, going out, etc. Going to the office, doing this and that. um, and with the pandemic, that sort of has put a halt on everything. So I mainly just spent my times indoors in a small space. My family lives in Colombia and in Miami, South Florida. So I can't see them because I can't travel. I can't see my friends. So I've really just been like in this tiny apartment, the majority of the time. And it gets a little lonely. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm like, f this. I got to get a dog. Plus, I've always wanted a dog for a bit. So I just thought it was the perfect time to get a dog. So yeah, I'm super happy with Hachiko. He's a very good dog as well. I ran into luck. He's already house trained, like, and he's a puppy. Like that's unheard of. He's the perfect size for my apartment. Not too big, not too small. Because I don't like small dogs, like lap dogs. He's about 25 pounds, so he's like a medium dog, kind of like a medium small dog. But he's definitely a dog that like I can like kind of wrestle with and play around with. You know, um, and kind of you know, get entertain, him and myself. He's not like a Chihuahua or a dog that's kind of just there. He's a pretty cool dog, and he's also pretty chill. Like he's not annoying. Like if I'm doing something and I'm busy, he can chill and he sleeps. And if he wants to play, like we can play as well. So yeah, I got super lucky, man. I'm super happy with him. All right, good question here by Josh Edwards. Danny, do you think Cruz winning the belt after a long layoff for the second time would make him the greatest bantamweight of all time? Uh, to be honest, he doesn't have to win the belt. I already think he's the greatest bantamweight of all time. Again, we just talked about greatness earlier, in an earlier question as far as Twitter, right? Let's pull up Dominick Cruz here. So, although he's been inactive, and although you could say that there's maybe by this time, because remember, Dominick Cruz might seem kind of young because he looks kind of young, but he's an old school fighter. He's been around since the WEC days. I mean, he's a former WEC champ. So he's definitely an older generation guy, but he was so ahead of his time as far as his skill set that you can look at his skill set today, and it still looks modern. It still looks up to par with the things that we see in today's bantamweight landscape, right? So that's definitely an advantage for him. But as far as greatness, I think out of all the bantamweights that have competed in the history of MMA, he's the bantamweight that's achieved the most. I mean, let's just pull up his record right here. I think Cejudo can definitely has a good chance of breaking that if he beats him and if he goes on to defend his belt. Plus, remember he's a former flyweight champion, so Cejudo's definitely on his way to become the greatest bantamweight of all time. But as of now, even if Cejudo beats him, I still think Dominick Cruz is the greatest bantamweight of all time because he won the WEC belt in 2010, so 10 years ago, a decade ago. The dude became world champion a decade ago. He he won it by defeating Brian Bowles. I believe Brian Bowles had a broken hand, and he didn't continue after round two, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but that's sort of from what I remember. And then he defeated Joseph Benavides. At the time, Joseph Benavides, I mean, he's still very good, but he was the man at that time. He beat Joseph Benavides, defended the title. Then he beat Scott Jorgensen, very good fighter at the time, defended the title. These are all UFC guys, so he was beating all UFC caliber guys. Then he defeated Uriah Faber, defended the title again. Then that's when he went on to the UFC, and they merged the promotions, and they kind of just handed UFC belts to WEC guys. He defeated Demetrius Johnson, someone that's considered, one of the greatest of all time. Definitely, he's definitely a top five guy. Um, and then, from there he had a bunch of injuries. Came back, defeated Takeya Mizugaki, then got a title shot against TJ Dillashaw, defeated TJ Dillashaw, who could also be in the argument of one of the greatest bantamweights that's ever existed. But again, he's got a win over him, so how can you put Dillashaw over Cruz? And also, Cruz has more title defenses, so how can you put Dillashaw over Cruz? That doesn't make sense, but people still put Dillashaw over Cruz. So he's defended the belt, the bantamweight belt, 1, 2, 3. He won it and he defended it 1, 2, 3. Wait, what? Yeah, he defended it three times, the WEC belt. Then he defended the UFC belt once. Then he had injuries. He came back and he won it. Then he defended it against Uriah Faber and then lost it to Cody Garbrandt. So he's got like a good amount of title defenses under his belt. Something Cejudo doesn't have at the moment as far as bantamweight title defenses. And yeah, he's got the most title defenses as far as any bantamweight goes in a major promotion, WC, UFC. So I think without a doubt, he's the greatest bantamweight of all time. If you were to beat Cejudo, oh man, that would just further his legacy. Um, I mean, as I said, I already think he's the greatest bantamweight of all time. If you were to beat Cejudo, he would definitely, I think, would erase any doubt in anyone's mind that he's the greatest bantamweight of all time. And then from that point on, it'll be kind of hard to surpass him. It's not impossible, but it'll be difficult. You would have to win a belt and hold on to it for quite some time, or go to a different weight class and pick up another belt there. I don't know, but you'll definitely have to do a lot to beat that if you were to beat Cejudo. And imagine if he ends up defending it too, like that'd be crazy. but um, but yeah, I already think he's the greatest bantamweight of all time. To answer your question. I just realized I didn't even realize, but I am past the hour mark. So I'm gonna answer one more question and then head out. All right. I'll just answer this follow up by Josh Edwards. If I didn't answer your questions, tweet at me for next live Q and A, and I'll get to them. Josh Edwards asks, furthermore, is it good for MMA for Dom to win given his injury history? So that is a fantastic question. For starters, I think if he wins, it would definitely validate the UFC's decision to give Dominick Cruz a title fight because, you know, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of heat about this, but I have seen some fans not been too happy with the idea that guys like Peter Yan, guys like Aljamain Sterling are out there, and they've been putting on work. They've proven that they deserve to fight for the belt. They're ranked, and yet Dominick Cruz hasn't fought in a long time. He's not in the rankings, and he's skipping them. So, um, from a PR standpoint, that would kind of validate that. So that's kind of good. But at the same time, that is a great question that you mentioned. I don't know how long Dom plans to stick around. He's 35 years old. He has a very successful career as a UFC commentator and analyst. Very successful. I think he's one of the best at his job, and so he has no need to fight to make money. He fights because he wants to. He could do many other things to make money, and at the same time, outside of those factors, again the age factor, he's 35, and also he has a long history of injuries. And I wonder how injured he's going into this camp because from what I remember, he had a lot of I forgot what condition he had on his feet, but he used to inject Botox into his feet just so he could actually train and fight, and he used to wrap his feet a lot. And from what I understand, that was kind of like an ongoing, never-ending condition. So I don't know if he's just putting up with it for this camp because it's for the title, and he sees a good opportunity here to make money and to build on his legacy. So he's kind of sucking it up, or he's actually good to go from it. If he's not, then I wonder how long can he keep it up? Like, can he go on to defend the belt? If he can't, I definitely think it's a bad thing for MMA because we could be in a situation where he beat Cejudo, who's kind of becoming a bit of a star. Even if you don't like his cringe, he's definitely dominating the headlines, and he's got some buzz around him, given the fact that, one, he's a fantastic fighter. He is a former or current flyweight champion. I don't even know. But either way, he's achieved a lot, right? He's an Olympian. Um, and the dude can scrap, man. The dude can fight, and he's just crazy shit on the mic. So he's definitely developing some buzz. So you would halt that and then vacate the belt, and then it would kind of be a weird situation, kind of like the GSP situation where he defeated Michael Bisping. But I would say that'd be a little bit of a different situation because Michael Bisping was towards the end of his career. I mean, he retired shortly after that. Whereas Cejudo, I don't think he's going to retire anytime soon. I think he's in his prime, and he's definitely not in the very beginning of his prime, but he's definitely deep into it. But he's definitely far from the end of his career. So it would put a halt on that sort of hype train, and then kind of be in a situation where what do you do next? Like, who fights for the vacant belt? That's definitely not a good situation. So I think it all depends. Uh, to answer your question, I think it all depends whether Dom has intentions to defend his belt. If he has intentions to defend his title, I think it's neither good or bad for MMA. I think it's just, you know, whatever. It's just normal. Um, but if he doesn't, I think it could be bad for MMA. Again, I don't think it would have like terrible repercussions. Like the division wouldn't recover or anything like that because there's plenty of good fighters that can take on the torch and continue, including Cejudo. But it certainly wouldn't be an ideal situation. So we'll wait and see. Again, I would love to interview Dom and actually ask him that. Like, if you win the title, do you have intentions to defend your belt? And also, how is your health doing? Like, can your body hold up title defenses? Like, or is this just a legacy fight? Like, where are you at? But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think maybe those questions, the closer we get to the fight and the more media they do, I think maybe they'll get answered. So we'll see. But if I get a chance to talk to Dom, that's definitely something I will ask him and then let you guys know on the live chats that I do. All right, so yeah, that's it for this week's live Q&A, episode 18. We're getting close to 20, so a nice little milestone we're coming up here. So very interesting. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate all the questions that you guys submitted for the last 3 weeks. All the questions have been fantastic. So thank you very much for that. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends about it. I really want this to grow and pick up some steam, and I can only do that with your help. There's only so much that I can do. So if you enjoy this, please, I ask that you let somebody know and share it and let people know what's good. Just as you enjoy it, maybe others can enjoy it too. So yeah, that's all I got. So yeah, stay safe and wash your hands, keep social distancing, and hopefully soon we can enjoy some fights with UFC 249. So again, thank you very much for tuning in, and yeah, that's all I got. Take it easy.